All right, so now this is the third video for this channel. Very excited to be making it, as always. And here we are going to be talking about early round draft strategy. If you should be going with hitters, if you should be going with pitchers. Now, Aaron teased us a couple of videos ago talking about how the majority of people, at least way more now than ever, are taking the pitchers earlier and earlier. But Aaron says that may not necessarily be what we want to do. Maybe we can zig while other people zag, but Aaron, before we get into the exact draft strategy, do you have anything you want to plug? I know that you wanted to plug a book on the last video. Anything in particular for this one?
Yeah, my fantasy baseball relief pitcher rankings are available at fantasyinframes.com. We have consensus rankings. Nate, Todd, myself, we rank all the fantasy relievers. We break down each bullpen in our mound visit articles. We've got average draft position market watch articles where we're letting you know where these pitchers are going earlier or later and which ones are values. So head over to fantasyinframes.com and make sure you check out our rankings. They're updated regularly.
Awesome. Well, that link will be down in the description, and let's just get into it. Generally, when you are finding yourself in these drafts, regardless of your draft position, actually, let's not say that. Let's go, if you're picking in the top 6 picks, are you finding yourself going with the hitter? Or are you finding yourself going with the pitcher? And really, is it going to depend on the league format? Just let you take this any direction you want to. But yeah, let's hear it.
Mason, you're handing me an onion. There are so many layers to this onion. And in our discussion about early starting pitching targets in the video ago, I mentioned briefly that early starting pitching was a 2021 trend amongst the industry experts. But it's actually been a little more prevalent in recent years, even in home leagues. Although, if you go back just 5 years ago, you wouldn't have been caught dead drafting a starting pitcher until you were around 6 if you were, quote unquote, a smart fantasy baseball player. But it's come full circle, and I'm trying to figure out why. Starting pitchers are still more volatile than top hitters, easily. It's just the nature of pitching. Pitching leads to a greater injury risk. And if you think that your early starting pitcher is less injury prone or less prone to be one of those 80% of starting pitchers that end up, with an injury, you're fooling yourself. But I think I know why these pitchers are being pushed up more and more every year. It's the reward. There aren't many aces. Despite the strategy that was named for them, like I talked about before, there just aren't aces. There are probably like 9 of them, and they're all gone by pick 30. So unless you've got one of those late draft spots in your draft from the first round, you're probably not going to be able to get 2 of them. Personally, I'd love to have one of the 9. DeGrom, Cole, Bieber, Darvish, Giolito, Buehler, Nola, Castillo, Scherzer, but it is not at all a necessity, as we mentioned with guys like Zach Gallen. The next layer of that onion, and you mentioned this a little bit as we headed into this video, when is the right time to draft that first starting pitcher? And if I can preach one thing to you, I can preach that it's important to be as safe as you can with your first few picks. Pitchers are they have a natural risk to them whenever you select them. So this is where the constructs of your league become important. Points leagues, typically starting pitcher friendly with their scoring. 1 point per out or 3 points per innings pitched. 1 point or even sometimes 2 points per strikeout. These are totals that hitters cannot match. Those scoring systems are built for starters, especially if you can make lineup changes during the week. This is what we would call streaming. This is the streaming aspect that pushes that. Even you would think that might say, hey, I could just pick up any pitcher and just total points, but that actually pushes up the top starting pitchers in these drafts because you need to still build a base. You can't just stream Colorado Rockies pitchers all year long. That's not going to work. So you need to have these aces, these top pitchers, so you can plug in around them. I am way, way, way more comfortable building a points league team around Garrett Cole than I would be in a simple rotisserie league. In rotisserie, it's a tougher decision. I would lean towards taking an established hitter who touches all 5 categories versus just taking a pitcher or starting pitcher. I can build that offensive base like I talk about in the first few rounds, and then use volume as my starting pitching guide for the rest of the draft.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off here, man, but I have a quick question. So if you're drafting now, so far away from the season, would you be a little bit more willing to lean with the hitters if the starting pitchers have a higher injury rate? And then as we get closer to actually opening day, then would you be a little bit more willing to pivot over to the starting pitchers, if that makes sense?
That is a sensible thought. If you didn't take into account that on any given pitch, you can be Matt Harvey and go from the best pitcher in baseball, the hottest thing, the Dark Knight, cover of Sports Illustrated, ESPN, 30 for 30, and throw one too many sliders, cutters, and all of a sudden you're getting your 4th shoulder surgery and you're getting cut out of the bullpen from the Los Angeles Angels 3 seasons later. Pitchers are volatile. It doesn't matter if you draft in January, November, or the day before the season starts. On any given pitch, just ask Matt Harvey, on any given pitch, you can go from a 1st round fantasy baseball pitcher to do not touch list.
Well, I guess that makes sense, man. I have not thrown a baseball since I was probably 16, but I can tell you that 16-year-old Mason, I mean, if I threw a couple too many, my shoulder was hurting. I will say that. But anyway, so you're saying that league size matters here for going hitters versus pitchers early. So what would be the difference between a 12-man league and a 16-man league? Which league would you be a little bit more willing to go with the starting pitcher?
Yeah, absolutely. The delineation actually comes kind of about at the 10-team mark. So when, a lot of people aren't lucky enough to have 11 other guys to play in the fantasy baseball league. So, I'm not going to shun you for playing any kind of, you could play in a 2-team league. I don't care how many teams are in your fantasy baseball league. Like if you're having fun playing fantasy baseball, that's the point of fantasy sports in general. And fantasy baseball, is obviously at least on the 2nd fiddle to football, maybe 3rd fiddle behind basketball now. So anything to make fantasy baseball fun, I'm all for it. But in a 10-team or fewer team league, innings pitched, they're just not as scarce. So it's a better plan and this might sound counterintuitive, but it's a better plan in smaller leagues to wait longer. When you get to 12 teams and beyond, you're all fighting. Like you can imagine, you're all fighting for these elite high strikeout innings, Ks per inning. Hence, that's why like in these extra leagues, which are all 12 teams and up or 15 teams, the average draft position for these pitchers are just going way, 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 way up. So again, we talk about average draft position like everyone understands where it comes from. It's really this mythical creature that was built in October and November when everyone else is like playing fantasy football and a whole bunch of us are still drafting fantasy baseball for 2021. So we're pushing this up. So when you're looking at average draft position, make sure you realize that that sites like NFC, Fantrax, they have been drafting since winter, and these ADPs are in 12, 15, even larger teams, larger size leagues. So pitching is so pushed up in those because it becomes shallower faster.
So in a league like that, would you be more willing to actually double tap pitcher at the very end of the 1st, beginning of the 2nd? Because if you were able to do that and kind of create that demand, maybe you would start a little bit of a run where teams after you have to kind of reach on pitchers just to guarantee that they get one.
Yeah, this is the pocket aces strategy. This is the strategy that you'll hear a lot of fantasy analysts talk about that they're going to employ if they're at the back of the 1st round. I don't know that I actually love that strategy. Again, if I'm going to lose my potentially lose my first two rounds of draft picks to injury, I want to minimize risk early. I know this sounds so boring and so lame, but it's true. It's tried and true. Minimize your risk early. Take those chances later. Find a pitcher later who has, only 120 innings pitched in his career. But you look at his minor league track record and he's striking out 13 guys every night. That kind of pitcher, if he pitches 150 innings and strikes out 170, he's so much more valuable. It's so hard to get the full value when you're drafting early. Just think of it this way. Mike Trout has to be one of the top 5 players every year to meet value. Those are huge expectations. And starting pitching being so volatile, if you're taking a top 5 starter, you have such a slim chance at providing that even equal value to what you paid on draft day for.
I guess that makes sense, man. I don't know why, but my monkey brain here is telling me that this looks like the exact conversation of going running back early in fantasy football, where it's a little bit more hyper fragile. But maybe it's worth it if you can actually. I mean, my monkey brain here is just telling me if you walk away with 2 of those stud pitchers with your first 2 picks, and then they actually hit and you're able to dodge the injuries, you just have a ceiling that really can't be touched by anybody else.
You touched on the most important thing in fantasy in general. You need to be one of the luckiest players in your league every year. That's how you win single leagues.
No, but this is what I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is what I talk about all the time. I talk about one guy out of 12 winning. So I kind of lean in with the strategy of, you know what, I want the guys that are that have the potential to be league winners. I want the guys that can far exceed their ADP, because if they don't hit their ADP, you are most likely going to lose regardless, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And that is the starting pitching comparison. You cannot draft Lamar Jackson in round 1 of your fantasy football drafts, because even if Lamar Jackson finishes as the top 2 or 3 quarterback in the 7th round, you're going to take the 6th best quarterback, 50% of the time. And he's going to be so close to Lamar Jackson that the advantage that the player who drafted Lamar Jackson thought he had is going to diminish right before his eyes as the season goes on.
All right. Well, perfect. I think that is a good end of the video. Do you have anything else that you want to plug? Anything else that you want to say with this early round draft strategy? The floor is yours.
Perfectly Framed podcast. Come on over and listen to Nate, Markham, Todd, Barnes, and myself. We've got amazing guests lined up for the entire season. We're talking relief pitching. We get into historical baseball, if that's your thing. Right now, we're into the 1930s and going through Negro League relievers. Awesome stories, just really cool historical baseball stuff. And plus, if you get a little nerdy and want to hear some baseball stats, we put one stat into focus, or metric into focus, every single episode to teach you how to play baseball and get and kind of grow your fantasy baseball mind.
Awesome. Well, that link will be in the description of the video. As always, you all know what to do.